Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. And apparently the gods are really pissed off with me because this is Arboria. And when you don't earn enough Veri to hand over to the gods, they get pissed. So just for your information, I got a review copy of this game. So this is a roguelike with Souls-like elements. And anything to make the wait for Elden Ring just that little bit less painful, right? But I've given this a shot. I've been playing for about 4 hours now, and I just can't get into it for many reasons that we'll get into over the course of this video. And yes, we are actually doing this one live, because screw trying to do this one any other way. So we start off with having to give all our money to the gods to try and appease them, but I really sucked at the last run, so I'm just kind of stuck with basically making them angry. And if the gods are angry, it actually makes the characters you can choose from worse. See? I can only pick 2 characters. They have very little in the way of proper stats, and they have bad perks. So that kind of sucks. And if you just get on a bad run of bad luck, you'll just be constantly stuck with them, which is really annoying. You can also go and upgrade stuff with money that you bring back. It's a lot like Souls currency, where if you die, you lose it all. But you have the opportunity to send some back as you go. And there are plenty of upgrades that you can get. But unfortunately, it's one of those roguelikes. Now, what do I mean by those roguelikes? I mean it's a roguelike where they feel the need to put the really important stuff behind upgrades. So, you'll have things like power attacks, where you hold down the right trigger, second weapon slot, second mutation slot, second item slot or healing slot, all locked behind upgrades. And it'll take you a few hours before you really have all of it. And this ties back into one of the reasons why I don't really like the game, but we'll get to that. Right now I want to talk about the theme of the game. And frankly, the game is gorgeous. I'm playing this game on high settings right now, pretty much across the board, except for shadows, which I turned down to medium in order to try and keep a stable frame rate. And even so, I was playing it on ultra before I started recording, and outside of the village dropping a few frames, everything was running just fine. It also just genuinely looks gorgeous. It has some great theme going on, the way that the characters interact with each other. And one of my personal favorite bits is when you head on over to the dungeon here and jump into it, you'll get this little, like, outgoing ceremony, which helps contribute a little bit of the theme. And it's a different one every time. And it has all of these weird little things going on. And then just out of nowhere, unceremoniously, one of the characters will be like, get the fuck in there. And you just drop in, and that's it. And it's great. It genuinely shows a lot of theme and just like a lot of just flavor to the universe that we got going on here. Doesn't really help when they start dropping the endless voice logs and bullshit on you like that as well, but only so much you can do. So, there is one thing that I really don't like about this game's theme though, and that's Rada, the fairy that follows you around. She sounds completely out of place in time. Like the sort of modern take on something, even though this is clearly not meant to be the modern world. What we got here? It's just better armor in general. Sure, I'll take it. But yeah, anyway. Welcome to Arboria. It's a 3D Souls-like with roguelike elements. Or a 3D roguelike with Souls-like elements. Holy shit, this is an early time for a creeper to be turning up. What the hell? Creepers don't usually turn up until the 2nd or 3rd floor. What the fuck is this? But anyway. It's Souls-like in pretty much every sense of the imagination, right? You use the analog stick to move, the B button to dodge, RB and RT to throw out your attacks. You've also got what's called mutations, which are basically spells. You throw them out by using the left bumper and left trigger. Although I'm technically using a DualSense for this, but despite, other than the fact that it shows the, whatchamacallit, other than the fact it shows the Xbox button prompts, it works perfectly, so, you know. I'm willing to bet it's probably got something to do with Steam input, but at least it uses Steam input properly. Looking at you, Neon Knights Pinball. And so you just gotta work your way through the dungeon, killing enemies, finding items, some of which can be better or worse, depending on, of course, the random number god. Your main goal is mainly to find... Yeah, I'm just going to let them sit there. Ow. Your main goal is basically to find the tree roots. If you find the tree roots and use the tree and save the tree roots, it lets you brain work with me here. It lets you the tree roots will unlock higher level upgrades, whether it be new buildings or just new upgrades for old buildings. That's simple, really. Other than that, it's just get to the end. Fight shit. Kill shit. Try and win, try and not die. And I will at least say, the minute-to-minute gameplay they've got going on here, or I should say second to second, really, but you get what I'm trying to say. I'm just going to put that straight on because of the thing that I just got. And a Firestone Hammer? Cool. I'll swap out the axe for this, because there's a different element, and we'll get to how elements are relevant later on. But, yeah, it's as simple as that. Just go find tree roots to heal up and get upgrades, kill things, and get money to take back along the way. Other than that, it's just, the rest of it is just really basic roguelike stuff. The levels are procedurally generated, the equipment is procedurally generated. It might have abilities, it might not. And it would be okay if it was just all of that. But there's a few things about this game which are just fucking weird. Like, that's the best thing I've got to say about it. Some of the shit is just fucking weird. So, you've got a bunch of different kinds of enemies that you need to go fight. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But there's a few things about it which are just immensely annoying in so many different ways. And considering how long that this game was in early access for, it's amazing some of these things did not get fixed. So, my number one problem with Arboria has to be the lock-on camera. I don't know what it is with this fucking camera. So, in a Souls-like game, or practically in any sort of game like this, right? In any sort of game like this, you need a good camera. You need a good lock-on camera. And you wouldn't think it would be so hard to do a proper lock-on camera for a game like this, especially since there doesn't seem to be that much relevance in this game in relation to just general height differences. So you're just thinking to yourself, okay, how do I make a basic lock-on camera that doesn't suck? I make it so that whenever I click the analog stick in order to turn on the camera, it locks on to the enemy that's directly in front of me. If I press the analog stick to the left, it goes to the target most directly to my left in like a 360-degree flat circle around my body. If I click it to the right, if I push it to the right, it does the same thing. This doesn't seem that hard to get right. And yet, for whatever bloody reason, this game just decides to go a completely different way about it, and it just doesn't work half the time. When you've got multiple enemies in front of you, and those enemies... Brain, work with me here. When you've got multiple enemies in front of you, and next to you, and behind you, and what have you, you know, they're just swarming you. I think what they're trying to do with the analog stick is they're trying to make it that you push in the direction of the enemy that you want to lock onto. So if it's like to the up and to the right of you, you push to the up and to the right. If it's to the up and to the left, you push to the up and to the left. But it just doesn't work. The lock-on just can't determine what enemy it is that you want to deal with. Before I get back to that, this is the in-between room. I like the touch of the fairy just throwing up, because the help prompt for this is just like, you send your fairy back, but be sure to look away. It's a nice hint. But then you've got this over here, which lets you... Yeah, we'll go with swing. Swing is usually useful because you want to be waiting between your attacks anyway. And then over on the right, you can use that to skip floors. But we're not going to do that. Also, sometimes you get blueprints or voice logs here. In this case, we've got the teleport blueprint. And when you get all the blueprints for specific weapons, it lets you combine them, but we'll get to that. Skip that, move on to the gameplay. But yeah, it makes you like point like the analog stick in the absolute direction of where the enemy you want to lock onto is. Under normal circumstances, this would work. But in this game, it just doesn't. I cannot tell you why it just doesn't work half the time. But it really just doesn't work. And as a result, the game is really frustrating to play. Because you just can't swap between enemies when you want to. And the weird thing about this game is that you really want to be swapping lock-on all the time. Just because of the way the enemies work. So, the thing about the way enemies work in this bloody game is that they take turns attacking you. When you have more than one enemy attacking you at a time, it becomes pretty damn obvious what's going on. But they genuinely just take turns. Like, hey, you can attack now, you can attack now, now you can attack now. And any amount of enemies that are around you will take the opportunity to attack you. But they just take turns. And it's so fucking bizarre when they do. Because, like, look, one wasp attacks, then the hover grunt attacks, then the other thing attacks. Then the first one will get the opportunity to attack again. Then the hover grunt attacks again. Then the wasp behind me will attack. See? It does this all the fucking time. Now, there might be a reason like that for this to be the case, where enemies can hit other enemies if they so desire. And to be fair, if that was the case, or at least if that was the reason, it wouldn't be too bad in the grand scheme of things. But it just makes the game really predictable. We're already using heavy armor, so there's no reason not to take this one. What's this? It's a blueprint. Yay! So now I can actually like combine stuff with swords. But I'm gonna replace this one just because we've seen that already. And so as a result, with the enemies just deciding to take turns attacking you, it feels repetitive when you go up against a bunch of enemies, because you know the way that they're going to react. In a proper Souls-like game, it would be like, enemies can attack you from any which way, and you have to be careful of all of them. But once you've got the pattern figured out, it becomes almost entirely irrelevant. And it also becomes really annoying to try and attack certain enemies, especially when you're in heavy armor, because heavy armor makes it so that you take longer to wind up and wind down from certain animations. And that means you've got less time to get your attacks in. And when they decide to just be more rude and just not let you take turns with each other, and not let you like really get a hit in while they're in between taking turns, it can be immensely frustrating. incredibly frustrating. And so as a result, I just find myself getting really annoyed by the repetitiveness of it. Because you just find yourself doing the same sort of tactics with your combat over and over again. Just because it works the same way pretty much every time. There are, like, if you get, like, 2 different enemy spawns, right? 2 different sets of spawning enemies. They can actually break the flow of turn taking, but it's very rare. So as a result, the combat just becomes really predictable. And that's the one thing you don't want in a Souls-like game. But it also really doesn't help that you're locked out of a lot of the stuff. I'm gonna replace this. Again, since you're locked out of a lot of the stuff that you are really going to need later on in the game, or just in general, really. Like, you're locked out of a second weapon slot, you're locked out of a second mutation slot, you're locked out of bloody heavy attacks to start with. Those don't take very long to unlock, but it just kind of creates this feeling that I've got going on with most roguelikes, right? But it's doubly bad when it comes to a Souls-like, where the idea of Souls-like is taking on specific challenges, doing those specific challenges, failing or getting better at them, and just slowly getting better over the course of the thing, over the course of the game. But with the amount of shit that you need to unlock over the course of Arboria, whether it be extra weapon slots, extra abilities, extra resistances, extra everything, it makes the game really just not feel like I'm improving, but feel like the game's improving for me. And it just gets frustrating after a while, where you're doing the same repetitive combat because you don't have access to 2 slots. You're doing the same repetitive enemies because it's the same levels that you need to do in order to actually get the very you need in order to level up your stuff. It's the same enemy tactics as well, because they all act in the same way. They all just take turns with each other, so you can get a pretty decent idea of who's going to attack next, where you're going to need to dodge. And even though the lock-on is really, fucking annoying, it's still predictable enough that this ends up not being as much of a problem as it could be, although it does still end up being a problem.
Keep the enemies away.
And as a result, it just feels like every other bog standard roguelike, where instead of, like, playing the genre for the things about the genre that I like, it's about playing the roguelike basics, where it's like, I'm paying, I need to get all this I need to get these upgrades, instead of thinking, like, how could I fight these guys better? What do I do differently? It just doesn't have the feel of a Souls-like. It has the feel of a roguelike with a Souls-like skin strapped to it. And again, this isn't really helped out with the whole elemental stuff, where it's like, if you get the right set of elements going on, you'll be doing much better. I'm not bothering to heal here because you get healed at the end of these.
You okay?
So, I've healed this part of the tree, and since I've healed it, it will contribute to getting me more upgrades as we go on when we get back to town. So yeah, there's another one in the next room. That'll bring us up to 20. So yeah, as a result, I just don't really like it that much. Which is a shame, because I would at least say that the base combat is competent.
Keep the enemies away.
The weapons are all very different. They've all got different wind-ups, they've all got different kinds of attacks. And things like the bloody saber are really cool, where you can charge up an attack by rapidly pressing the attack button, and it does more damage the more presses you're willing to give it. It's bloody cool, admittedly. But then you've got this shit with the elements, Because I realized I didn't actually finish the point I was trying to make there. So the elements are pretty much randomly chosen, depending on the floor that you're on. And pretty much everything will have that random element. So if you come into a floor and you don't have the right element, great. If you do, you're good. But again, considering how long it takes you to unlock all of the bloody like slots that you need and stuff in order to carry around the elements and what have you, it just makes it overly frustrating. And like, it's actually a really cool idea. Like, watch this. So I can, like, if I hold A to combine this, I can take this essence, combine it with anything that I've got, like the shock totem, for example, and turn it into a dark totem, increasing your elemental and mutation damage by 20%. Cool! So I can just give myself entirely new items. I can give myself just better stuff overall. And that's a really cool little idea. But again, you've only got so many inventory slots. You can only combine so many things that you've done. And you can't actually combine, like, weapons that you don't have all the blueprints for. You can't actually combine it with certain things. And you only start with 10 inventory slots. So you just find yourself being really crippled by the game. And the thing about Souls is that most Souls games can be won on a level 1 run. It's hard, but you can do it. Excuse me. This game, though, this doesn't feel like it. This just feels like the same sort of thing that every roguelike has. Where you just have to be constantly leveling up. You have to be constantly thinking about your upgrades and all of that shit in order to actually get anywhere. And it's like, no thank you. I like... Swap? What? Oh, I see. Back. So, oh yeah, if you have a mod in your inventory, you can apply it to yourself here. Yeah, we'll go with swing though, because with the way this game works and the weapon that I've got, that's actually a pretty decent idea. So yeah, I need a battery in order to actually use the lift here, which is a shame. And we can just go. So yeah, instead of me being able to like get better at the game and improve and get to the point where I can beat the game in one shot with a level 1 character, I feel like the game is just kind of screwing me over in this regard, you know? I feel like it's just being like, hey... I feel like it's just being like, hey, you need to spend all of your upgrades to make this work. And you know what else really doesn't help? It's the level design. Because it's all really flat. And generally, I should say, generally uninteresting. And considering the fact that the draw distance works the same, and most of like the obstacles and stuff you'll be going across are the same, other than like quests, which are unique to like certain floors and locations and what have you, a lot of these floors just feel absolutely the same. There's very little in the way of variety. Every secret is already pointed out on the map because there'll be like a shard in there or a very obvious like wall that you can break. Oh look, a different elemental attribute. That's kind of neat. At least elements in this game are only like strong to one and weak to one, which doesn't make it that big of a deal, but it's just another thing you have to deal with when you're being arbitrarily crippled with the amount of stuff you can carry. I guess the best thing I have to say about, well, the thing I have to say about this game is, I came in expecting a Souls-like game with a bit of roguelike in it. Instead, I got a roguelike with a tiny bit of Souls in it. And that seems to be my biggest issue with Arboria. It's good for the second-to-second stuff, don't get me wrong. Like, this actual combat here, if it wasn't for the fucking camera, is competent. With a good variety of weapons, mutations, and just enemy types to fight. And they introduce more as you go down, and they often become more and more dangerous. It is absolutely not an awful game by any sense of the word. But just the roguelike stuff in it just drives me up the wall. Because I honestly do feel like, right? I honestly do feel like that the roguelike side of things is most of the reason this game is not as enjoyable as it is. From the obvious stuff, like needing to just be constantly building up stuff. Building up your resources in order to get upgrades. Like, look at this shit. I don't know why, but they made it so that your rata takes up inventory space. So that just makes it even more crippling, right? But the way that the enemies work, and the way that they take turns attacking you, the way that the lock-on works, the way that basically everything in this game works, feels like it was inspired by the fact that this game is a roguelike. And therefore, most of the stuff I don't like about this game comes from the fact that it's a roguelike. And again, with how interesting of a theme this is, and... Oh, I actually do have to beat you. With how interesting of a theme this is, with how, like, expressive the environments are, despite the fact that the draw distance is so bloody short. With how neat, like, the characters are and the concept is.
That was close.
I feel like this really would have had a chance if it was just a proper Souls-like. No roguelike bullshit, although you can have, like, a roguelike dungeon if you insist. It's okay to have something like that. Bloodborne did it, you can too. That's absolutely okay. Gotta say, he's, yeah, this is the one that lets you, deal multiple, a really powerful hit by just, rapidly hitting the attack button. Like, with the theme they've got going on, the base combat, and just the general feel of it being pretty good. Like, nothing massively wrong with the feel outside of the lock-on. You probably could have made this just a proper roguelike and you would have been fine. No, a proper Souls-like, I should say, sorry. But they had to make it a roguelike, and so it just feels like it overrides everything else about this game that I could potentially like about it. So as a result, I just find myself being disappointed. I'd like to play it more, but I just don't really want to. What we got here, it's a fire totem. I'm going to stick with the one that I've got. Where are we? I guess we have to go down this way. Find the next route. I don't hate it, I'm just disappointed. If they gave me the option to play this as a proper Souls-like with properly constructed levels, with enemies that don't, like, actively take their turn, with, just less general roguelike bullshit in general, I'd like this a lot more. Yeah, I'm just swinging away because that's the only thing I can really safely do. I've got to get rid of some of these enemies. I'd like it a lot more if that were the case, but... yeah. The roguelike just poisons this. Makes it nowhere near as good as it could potentially be.
Leave it to me.
And that's one of the worst things.
Safe.
Missed potential. Ow.
You are wounded. Can you go further?
Do I really have anything else to say about it? Oh, I guess I'll pause and show you, like, this here. Shows you the points you have for constructing custom weapons, which is an upgrade I don't have yet. Your mods here. Databanks, which show you, like, the audio logs. But I'm not going to play any of them right now. The blueprints that you have. And here's the options. You get a fair few, like being able to turn off Radar entirely, which is nice. Auto-target doesn't seem to work, and I'm not sure why. Analytics, apparently. They really should ask you about that when you start. Here's your options. Bunch of pretty decent stuff. Turn off motion blur as soon as you turn on the game, otherwise you'll get annoyed. Decent amount of sound sliders, nothing wrong there. Here's your gamepad controls. Nothing wrong with the options menu here. It's been an early access for long enough. If it didn't have those by now, it would have been ridiculous, but it's enough to work off at least. I think I'll just end it once we get past this, this route.
That was close.
Let's say, is there like a dude who'll let me send like half my stuff back? Or am I just gonna die? No, I'll go. I'll take you out. There we go. Now I'll just make a run straight for the drop point. Drop down point. Although you actually can't run while there's enemies nearby, which is annoyingly weird. There's our drop point. Like, I'd appreciate the ability to run through these bastards. You do also get these teleporters there, but I've never needed to use them. They do give you a lot of them, though, which is nice. Let you explore the levels more thoroughly. There might actually be a mini-boss here. They tend to pop them up. What? Can't use in combat. Okay. Yep. Mini-boss. Yeah, we'll end it off with this, but the mini-boss just doesn't really act any differently than a normal boss. There are also like really big bosses, but I just haven't gotten there yet. Just because I don't have the upgrades to really make it work, you know. But see, this boss is a joke because I just had the right elemental thing. I had the right elemental thing and the ability to combine it, so I just finished it off. And it's a bad treat. Also, the loading times are really fucking quick. I don't even have this on an SSD. That's actually kind of impressive. Considering how good this game can look, it's impressive at that. Although I do think that, yeah. Hang on. Yeah, we'll just enhance and finish it off. What do we got this time? Yeah, screw perfect dash. So yeah, final opinions on Arboria. The moment-to-moment Souls combat is good. There's a lot of weapons, a lot of mutations, and a lot of ways to play around with them that can give you your own unique build, and it actually does make it a bit fun. But the minute-to-minute stuff just starts to get really annoying, like the fact that it feels like you have to upgrade, and it doesn't have that sort of Souls-like feel where you can feel yourself getting better. It feels more like you're just, adding points to upgrades, and that's what's making you better, and not like actually getting better at the game itself. Enemies take turns attacking you, which is weird. The lock-on is bloody terrible, and all of these things, combined with the fact that they like lock off a bunch of things to just make it a bit more crippling, don't make it feel like a Souls-like game. It just feels like a roguelike with a Souls-like skin. It doesn't really do anything particularly great, and as a result, I'd rather go play a pure roguelike instead. It's not a bad game, but it's also decidedly average enough that I would feel bad recommending it. If you're really desperate for something to make the wait for Elden Ring seem that little bit less long, I mean, sure, give this a go, it can't hurt. But again, just not something that I would outright recommend. With that said, this has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.